Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, tired after a day of showing off tons and tons of new content as the FLC for The Silence and the Fury is now out and about. But just because the dwarfs and beastmen and ogres and all sorts of other nonsense are just going crazy all over the place does not mean that I'm going to be skipping out on giving you guys some sweet, sweet lore about those crazy Chaos Dwarfs. I will note that because this week, because I'm probably going to be releasing this video on Monday or Tuesday, because this week is functionally July 4th, which of course is the Independence Day holiday in the US, there will definitely be less episodes this week. I don't know if that means there's going to be 3 episodes or 4 episodes, but there won't be 5. There will be 4 at most, just because it's a holiday. Also, I am crazy busy with all the new content and stuff, so you're probably going to experience slight interruptions in your Chaos Dwarf content, but it's not going to be anything horrible, and we will be continuing to pump out episodes until we're done. I will note, for anyone that's curious and kind of trying to keep track or keep up with how much we've got left, I would estimate that there is probably somewhere in the ballpark of 5 to 8 episodes left. So that's kind of where we're at. But without further ado, let's jump into continuing with Chaos Dwarfs worldwide. The first question for today is, what can you tell us about the following locations? The Flayed Rock, the Gates of Zharr, and the Falls of Doom. So, the Falls of Doom are really simple. That is the name of the giant waterfall where the River Ruin descends from the highland or the plateau of Zorn-Uzkul to the Darklands proper. And then it flows south through the Darklands. It eventually, when it passes through the Plain of Zharr, it actually passes through the city of Mingolzar Nagrund itself, which is, they use that a lot in their industry to cool off a lot of things, but that's the big thing there. The Gates of Zharr is a outpost that is the halfway point on the stone road that connects Mingolzar Nagrund and the Tower of Gorgoth. So the Gates of Zharr it's a small military outpost essentially that is, there's a road that goes through it that connects those two cities that is constantly busy with groups of slaves, munitions, weapons, armies, just constantly going back and forth because the Tower of Gorgoth provides a ton of materials for the capital. Then there's Flayed Rock. Supposedly, Flayed Rock is a large mound upon which sits a huge, horrific tower covered entirely with the skin flayed from hundreds of slaves that tried to revolt against the Dawi Zharr of the Black Fortress. This giant canvas of stitched, preserved flesh is enchanted by sorceries, so that it always remains in the fresh condition like on the day it was built. The supposedly part is that supposedly the story behind where all the flesh came from, but Flayed Rock is literally a very large construction made of flayed skin that never rots. It's always as wet and fresh as the day those people had their all of their flesh stripped from them. This gruesome warning serves to remind all of those who would attempt to defy Hashut and the Masters of the Black Fortress what awaits them. And it's been there a good long time. So, definitely a spooky sight to see if you're coming in from the east. Next question. Do the Chaos Dwarfs ever assault or attempt to capture the Silk Road? So, I'm not sure if you mean... I'm not sure if you mean the actual Silk Road, because there is a Silk Road in Warhammer Fantasy, which was the Talayan route that utilized the Road of Skulls through Zorn-Uzkul and eventually came down on top of Cathay a really, really long time ago, or if you actually mean the Silver Road, which is the much more popular route to Cathay, cutting through the Darklands and mirrors the Silk Road of our universe, or our reality. Regardless, honestly, the Chaos Dwarfs very rarely bother assaulting trade caravans, as the groups that make these daring journeys very, very rarely do so without having an extremely impressive bodyguard to ward off potential attackers. There are people who make this journey, which is a fool's errand, honestly. You're probably going to be much more in danger of encountering roving monsters or ambitious tribes of goblin wolf riders than you are the Chaos Dwarfs. That being said, the Zharr will absolutely attack you sometimes if they believe it's worth the effort, but when your desired resource is just slaves, honestly, cutting off those particular routes isn't really a good use of time or resources. Perhaps if it's a large enough caravan, or if they're loaded up with something that interests the sorcerer prophets, a fight may break out, but it's just not something the Dawi Zharr seem to be particularly interested in. You know, I think honestly at best they would almost prefer putting tolls on these people, but they're able to really avoid the Chaos Dwarfs by just going wide around them. And the Dawi Zharr have never really seemed to express a deep interest in securing these routes and bothering with having to defend and hold them. It's just not something they consider worth their time or effort. They'd much rather be busy working in their cities or sending out fleets or armies to go attack neighboring lands and capture large groups of slaves. Caravans tend to be very fast-moving, well-defended, well-oiled machines, and that's just not something the Chaos Dwarfs want to deal with. You know, quite frankly, the armies of the Dawi Zharr are incredibly slow. They're able to march without tiring, and thus they can cover extremely large distances in impressive times, but a caravan that's well prepared for traveling across the world is a target that is literally designed from the bottom up to outpace the Chaos Dwarfs and stay ahead of them, especially when you consider they tend to have, like, notable mercenary groups of ogres and all sorts of other stuff helping out defend them. It's just not worth the effort. So I would say it's probably for sure happened. There have been attacks from the Dawi Zharr on the various trade routes that pass through their lands, but it's pretty rare. Alright, moving on. How important is the Road of Skulls to the Chaos Dwarf Empire and economy? Not at all, really. Like, not in any... it's just not. The Road of Skulls is virtually never used by the Chaos Dwarfs, being up on... because the Road of Skulls gets you across Zharr, which is mostly abandoned by the Chaos Dwarfs outside the garrison fortress surrounding the ruined hold of Uzkalak. Well, I wouldn't say it's ruined. Abandoned is probably a more accurate term. The only thing the Chaos Dwarfs care about controlling here is the river route that they dug between the Sea of Chaos and the Falls of Doom, which allows them to maintain connecting almost the entirety of the Chaos Dwarf Empire via the River Ruin. You know, because their fleet, the Chaos Dwarfs constructed a very bizarre and impressive system that allows them, by using, like, different sections that can be filled up with water, so it raises the water level, and then they move to the next section, raise the water level, move to the next section. They designed some clever engineering that allows them to advance their naval vessels up the Falls of Doom, so they're able to exit out the northern route into the Sea of Claws, or the southern route into the Sea of Dread, but they don't really care about holding the land of Zharr. It's just not worth the effort. So the Road of Skulls doesn't really mean anything to the Chaos Dwarfs. It operates much more commonly as an invasion route to the old world by the forces of Chaos that are willing to go up against the Kislevites or Karak Kadrin. What are all the major settlements in the Darklands, and where are they located? Who owns them? Okay, so this isn't just Chaos Dwarfs, this is literally all major settlements. The major settlements in the Darklands all belong to the Chaos Dwarfs, though there are a couple of little hidden away exceptions. The four major fortifications of the Dawi Zharr we've already talked about extensively, being Uzkalak, Mengozar Nagrin, the Tower of Gorgoth, and the Black Fortress. But that's only obvious settlements. There are 3 others of note. The biggest one is that the Skaven do, of course, have a huge fortress within Crookback Mountain, where Clan Rictus rules supreme, and that's actually where a lot of the underway condenses into a single colossal tunnel beneath Crookback Mountain. So, and Clan Rictus controls it. So Clan Rictus extorts a toll on everyone that passes through. So if you want to get from the east to the west, you're Skaven, you pretty much have to go through Crookback Mountain, unless you're willing to go overland, which would be stupid for Skaven. So Clan Rictus is incredibly wealthy, and that's their major base of operations. You know, it's kind of like it's that critical junction point, and it's a very, very densely protected settlement, probably one of the most difficult Skaven fortresses to take from a lore perspective, next to, I would say, only Skaven Blight, and then maybe Hell Pit. There's, of course, also the ruined Fortress of Vorag in the south of the Darklands, where dark things dwell, and ghouls can be found in just horrific numbers. Finally, to the west of the Tower of Gorgoth is Mount Greyhag, which is heavily and deeply infested with goblin tribes. I believe night goblins in particular. But those are all of the inhabited locations within the Dark lands proper. If you want to bump into other lands, you would need to start crossing the mountains. Like, you could, of course, head down to Nagashazar by the Straits of Nagash, but you're well out of the Darklands at that point by crossing over those mountains. Or you could head to the east and head into the Mountains of Morn, or the Swamplands, which is Noblar territory. But those are not part of the Darklands proper. Next up, what are the major differences between the Silk Road and the Road of Skulls? Which is better to travel, and what should potential travelers consider and plan for on these ventures? So, once again, I assume this is a mix-up of people thinking that the Silk Road is what the Silver Road is, because the Silver Road is what crosses through the middle of the Darklands. The Silk Road goes north. However, let's take this opportunity to talk about the actual Silk Road. So, the main difference between the Silver Road and the Silk Road is that to take the Silk Road, you have to go north along the Road of Skulls eventually. But the Silk Road was a route discovered in the Imperial calendar year of 1699, which was roughly, we're in 2520 nowadays-ish. So, you know, that's a good 800 years ago. And it was discovered by 2 Talaeans named Rico and Rabio. And they were attempting to find an overland route to Ulthuan by going east, because they did not know that the Orient existed. This route, the way it goes is you start in Talea, you head east over the Appuccini Mountains, pushing through the Border Princes, then you cross north through Blackfire Pass, hug the World's Edge Mountains until you reach High Pass, at which point you follow the Road of Skulls across Zorn Uzkul, which will lead through a narrow route through the northernmost peaks of the Mountains of Morn into the high elevations of the Kadatha Plateau, at which point you need to follow the northern foothills of the Mountains of Morn until reaching the eastern steppes, which will eventually lead into Cathay as you follow the foothills further south. Now, I'm going to be honest, I think this path in the modern lore is completely asinine. You would need a massive horde in order to get through it. I do not think it would be feasible in the modern lore. But perhaps 700 years ago, it was a more practical way than just crossing through the Darklands proper, especially when they did not know what was on the other side of the Darklands. Many people in the old world, virtually everyone in the old world, thought that if you went east across the Darklands, you would either hit the edge of the world and you would just, there'd be nothing. It was just an abyss once you hit the edge. Or that if you could cross the Darklands, it would lead you to Ulthuan, either by land, or would have, if you made it across the Darklands, you'd show up on the ocean, and then Ulthuan would be right there. They didn't realize that, no, there's actually, a whole nother mountain range, and then Cathay, and then the ocean, and then you still have to deal with the western hemisphere of the planet. So, people... The old worlders took a very long time to discover the geography of the planet, and there are still a fair amount of people in the old world who... There are many uneducated people in the Warhammer Fantasy universe that believe the world is flat. Among humans, at least. The dwarfs and the high elves are too well educated and know better, but many humans do not. Alright, next question. How difficult are Chaos Dwarf cities to siege, say compared to their western cousins Karaks? Waging war against one of the major outposts of the Dawi Zharr would be obscenely difficult. Let's walk through the process of why this is the case. First off, you have to get there. Whether it's the Tower of Gorgoth, the Black Fortress, the fort surrounding Uzkalak, or Mingalzar Nagrand itself. Every one of these locations is thousands and thousands of miles deep in the Darklands, which is the deadliest environment on the planet next to only Lustria and the Chaos Wastes. It's extremely oppressively hot during the day, and miserably cold at night if you're up in Uzkalak. You will die levels of cold. But the regular Darklands are just hot all the time. There's no fresh water or any reliable sources of food, and the creatures that do manage to survive in this land are all aggressive meat eaters that kill for their sustenance. You'll be constantly harassed by all sorts of monsters, including Dreadmaws, Bale Taurus, and even Magma Dragons if you're incredibly unlucky. Assuming you manage to somehow march your forces across the Darklands while keeping supplies safe from harm, once approaching close to the lands of the Chaos Dwarfs, you'll run into even worse dangers in the terrain, as they dump immense amounts of toxic waste far from their own territory, which poisons the very air and pollutes any other supplies you would find in those areas, even water deep beneath the earth, if you're lucky enough to find it. So, after trudging through all of that, you'll finally arrive in the lands of the Chaos Dwarfs, who will of course know you're coming long in advance, because there's nowhere to hide, and between the sorceries of Hashit and Hobgoblin Wolfrider scouts, they'll absolutely see you. There's no way you're going to surprise them, unless your Wolfric can teleport in on a boat. Depending on the size of your force, they'll proceed to either prepare for a siege or march out and meet your force in a position advantageous for them. Regardless, you'll have to go up against the Chaos Dwarfs' immense war machines and terrifying sorceries, which specialize in dealing horrific amounts of casualties against even the strongest defenses. And you're going to be fighting them on the territory that they want to fight you on, so they're going to have all the advantages in terrain and positioning. Should you somehow win an open battle against the Dawi Zharr, this will lead to the beginning of a proper siege against the colossal structures designed for this very purpose. The only resources within these areas will be contained in the towers or fortresses themselves, and you'll be facing off against the greatest siege masters of the Warhammer world next to only the Dawi themselves. Unless you can find a way to force open the gates and bring superior numbers to bear, you are utterly doomed. To attack the Chaos Dwarfs and succeed requires an insane amount of careful preparation, or such a colossal horde that even losing tens of thousands of troops is meaningless. The only times the cities of the Chaos Dwarfs were truly put under strain was during the Black Orc Slave Rebellion in Mengilzar Nagrand, which had the distinct advantage of taking place already in and around the city itself, and the Greenskins were able to turn the Chaos Dwarfs' own weapons against them. The only other time they were put under strain of note was when Tarmakon, the Maggot Lord of Nurgle, brought such an immense tide of bodies against Draswath the Ashen and the garrison of the Black Fortress that the Dawi Zharr were just purely overwhelmed in open battle and forced to retreat to the Black Fortress itself. But even this reaped a horrific toll on Tarmakon's hordes, and it could be argued that the two armies were engaged more in a show of strength than an actual true battle of utter destruction, as ultimately they both desired an alliance. Plus, once Draswath fell back to the Black Fortress, he felt extremely confident that he would be able to hold against anything Tarmakon would throw at him. Obviously, Tarmakon disagreed, but which of them was right? I don't know, it's kind of hard to say. Alright, next up. It has been noted that the original hold of the Dawi Zharr is a terrifying forbidden place haunted by unmentionable nightmares. Why is this? And why haven't the Chaos Dwarfs attempted to capture and utilize the monstrous creatures said to dwell within? Uzkalak is the original hold, founded upon the towering plateau by the ancient Dawi who would eventually become what we know as the Chaos Dwarfs. As you say, it is indeed a forbidden and terrifying place that extends deep beneath the earth. It was here that those ancestral dwarfs hid as a colossal tide of demons and warriors of chaos and all sorts of other nasty things swept across their homeland, and in desperation they turned to Hashut. As we've spoken about earlier, the greatest punishment that the Chaos Dwarf sorcerers can mete out to one of their to Oathbreakers and the other worst offenders of their society is to just throw them within the deeps of Uzkalak and just leave them there to be preyed upon whatever else is within. They just seal them in there, and by the time they open it back up to throw someone else in, that person is gone and never seen again. But we don't actually know what's down there. It could literally be anything. It could be that maybe there are unique creatures or demons that Hashut has spawned. Perhaps Hashut himself is down there, like his physical form is somewhere within the deeps. Or maybe there's just chaos spawn or unmentionable unknown horrors that were spawned during the early days of the pact between the Dawi Zharr and Hashut. We have no idea. There's never, to my knowledge and the lore that I have available, there has never been a survivor since the Chaos Dwarfs left Uzkalak who have entered the lower deeps and has come out. If you go down in there, it is a death sentence, and from the Chaos Dwarf perspective, it is guaranteed death. There are no records of what exists down there or what lives down there, which inclines me to think that whatever it is, it's probably too powerful for the Chaos Dwarfs to control. If it's Hashut himself, or some embodiment of his power, or just who knows what, it's probably something that either can't be controlled or simply cannot be captured. Or if it's actually Hashut himself, the Chaos Dwarfs would probably not dare to even risk trying to capture it. Not to mention that the power of such a beast would be just absurd. But for whatever it is down there, the Chaos Dwarfs are terrified of it. They are genuinely terrified of it, which says a lot, because they are not scared of much. So I just don't think they are bold enough to try and master whatever lives down there. I don't think they're even bold enough to just get records of it. They seem to be very content not knowing what's down there. So maybe it's like a Cthulhu-esque horror that is one of those things that even if you look upon it or experience it, it just breaks your mind, and reality unfolds and your head explodes or something before you get devoured. I don't know. It's impossible to say. I just don't have the information that I would need in order to answer that. But hopefully that gives enough information to answer your question. And then the last two questions that I have for today are going to be the last of the, we'll call them special questions. But the questions that are a little bit more unique. And the first of these is, what is the nicest thing a Chaos Dwarf has ever done? So, well, you know, the Chaos Dwarfs take oaths and debts extremely seriously. So, big if, but if you managed to somehow save the life of a Chaos Dwarf, they would owe you a debt. Whether or not, like, even if they really don't like you, as long as you're not like a dwarf or something, or you're not trying to kill them or whatever, like, they wouldn't be stupid about it. But if you saved their life, you could basically call on them that they owe you a debt and they need to pay that debt. So they would take that incredibly seriously and find a way to repay it. Likely by saving your life. You might not like the way they saved your life. You know, if somebody threatens you, he might show up with, like, an army of hell cannons and obliterate your hometown to deal with that threat. You know, killing everyone in addition to the person that was hunting you or something. It'd probably be like a monkey paw situation where he would do what you wanted, but you might not like the end result. Even though you would probably survive. That being said, you know, like I said, if a Chaos Dwarf does owe you a debt, there are two rules you need to keep in mind. Number one, don't expect them to be nice about it, and don't expect it to be a good result. They'll do what you want as long as they can and it's within their power and not unreasonable, but don't, like, you know, don't expect a lot. And number two, once they no longer owe you any debts, get the hell out of there. Get out. Just bolt as fast as your legs will carry you and get the hell out, because they are, the instant you are no longer binding them with an oath or a pact like that, oh boy, like, you really don't want to be anywhere near that guy. Because if anything, because you have that personal relationship, he would probably be gunning for you even harder. So as soon as you're done dealing with them, leave. You know, just shoot. And then the last question for today, and also the last what I consider like joke questions, or maybe not so super serious questions, this is the last one of these, is, if a Chaos Dwarf turns to stone and no one is around to see it, does he even matter? This one is actually super obvious. No, he didn't. Obviously, he was weak and no one of importance if he was somehow alone and stupid enough to let himself be turned to stone. As everyone of the Hashut Creed knows, only the weakest and most pathetic die. If you died, then clearly Hashut didn't favor you, and you were a fool. Because if you had been clever, and you were one of Hashut's favored, you would have survived. Your sorceries never would have fallen out of your control, and you would be doing well and reaping in favors and rewards. So if failure somehow claims your life, you deserved it because you're scum and you're garbage. That is the way of the Chaos Dwarfs. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Like I said, there will probably be like slight interruptions just because of all the content going on. And of course, Independence Day weekend, not that I really care to celebrate the holiday itself, but, you know, a holiday gives me an opportunity to spend time with my family and do stuff like that. So, thank you all so much for watching. I really hope y'all are enjoying this series. And for this episode, let me know what's the most interesting thing I've talked about so far. So, of all the episodes you've watched, I think this is episode 10, so we're like 300 plus minutes into talking about Chaos Dwarf lore. Let me know what your favorite thing has been. What was your favorite thing that you learned about the Dawi Zharr? Or what was your favorite question that was answered? Please let me know. I'm super duper excited to hear about that. Next time we will be talking, we have one more question pertaining to Zharr itself, and then we're going to be diving in to biology and sorcery followed by Hashit himself. So I hope you're all excited for those future episodes, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye.